What's up everyone, Vu of Envu Films back with another video, and today I want to talk about the announcement of the new Panasonic S5 II, S5 II, whatever you Panasonic D-bags want to call it. And yes, I'm a Sony D-bag fanboy. I film with Sony cameras. Ever since I started back in 2014, I've always had Sony cameras, never switched to any other brand. I did try Fujifilm for a couple months, not by selling off my Sony cameras, but I tried the Fujifilm X-T4 in conjunction with my Sony a7 III before the Sony a7S III was released to use 4K 60 and 10-bit, which is the closest I've ever come to quote-unquote switching to another camera. But with that said, the Panasonic S5 II announcement is a fantastic one for all Panasonic users, as well as every other camera brand fanboy there is out there. Pretty much now I have nothing to make fun of the Panasonic system for. They now have phase detect autofocus, which is pretty much the one main weakness in Panasonic cameras, if you call it that, especially with the ability to do things like film yourself and not have to worry about autofocus, or film someone else while you're not keeping an eye on your camera, be able to safely rely on autofocus, and just ease of use for run and gun filmmaking. And I think you can't deny the benefits of a great reliable autofocus system when you're doing run and gun shoots. And everyone I've ever spoke to that came from Panasonic and let's say switched over to Sony, or to a lesser extent Canon, for autofocus, run and gun filmmaking just becomes a lot easier for them. This really is no secret. With that said, based on the reviews I've watched on the Panasonic S5 II, it seems like the autofocus is incredible. Actually, it's probably right in between Sony and Canon in terms of video autofocus. Sony, in my opinion, is still the most reliable video autofocus system available, especially when you're talking about the newer cameras, a7S III, FX3, FX30, A7R5. And then surprisingly, what I've noticed is Canon is kind of lacking in terms of their video autofocus, especially on like the cheaper, quote unquote, less than $4,000 video cameras. The autofocus seems to be quirky, seems to struggle in low light, and actually seems to be somewhat unreliable, especially in the examples I've seen online. I've always assumed that Canon was like neck and neck with Sony until I was watching Panasonic S5 II reviews yesterday, and I was just like, wow, like Canon is actually pretty bad. I was just really surprised how unreliable Canon autofocus could be. So Panasonic really stepped up their game, and to be quite honest, you really can't go wrong with any camera brand these days. If you're on Canon and you're invested in it, if you're on Panasonic and you're invested in it, if you're on Sony and you're invested in it, and even like Nikon, or something like that, there is really no reason to be jumping brands, because every camera manufacturer has just great cameras all around. I mean, you could give and take specs here and there. Like for $2,000, the S5 II has almost every feature the Sony a7S III does at like $3,500. Obviously 4K 60 and the S5 II is still cropped. Obviously you lose autofocusing features in slower frame rates. Frame rates are available in the S5, I think up to 180 frames per second, but it's not great quality. There's a lot of little things here and there that separate camera to camera, but generally speaking, if you have any of these newer cameras that has up to 4K 60 cropped or not, 10-bit 422 or 420 at least, you can't really go wrong with being able to make content regardless if you're good at manual focusing or not. Which means if you have anything from Canon, Sony, Panasonic, Nikon, Fujifilm, you should be able to create fantastic films, fantastic content with these cameras. There's no reason to switch. YouTubers I see switch a lot because I think, one, they're bored, or two, it helps them gain subscribers from more like user bases. So if there's a Canon shooter who has a lot of Canon subscribers, if he switches to Sony and makes a video about switching to Sony, he gains a lot of subscribers from Sony users. And then when he decides to, switch from Sony to Panasonic, he gets a lot of Panasonic subscribers on his channel. And a lot of times people who subscribe to you, the vast majority of them don't really unsubscribe for random reasons. A lot of times they get invested in your personality and I don't even care what camera you use. They just like watching your content. But what I do think is for people who are getting into filmmaking, photography today and have not bought a camera yet and have not fully invested into a brand or system yet, this is an interesting time, because what camera brand should you go for? And as a Sony user, I can confidently tell somebody, just buy Sony. Sony has great specs, great image quality, great autofocus, 4K 60, 4K 20, 10-bit 422, all that stuff. And, obviously the best lens collection that one could find for any camera brand. But you could also make the argument for Panasonic. Panasonic has now with S5, and I'm pretty sure every new camera after S5 is going to have phase detect autofocus, and pretty much spec for spec, they should be able to match Sony, with all the price ranges. Because if you think about it, the S5 II is actually more video spec heavy than the A7 IV. However, for photography, the A7 IV does have better, more megapixels at 33, and the overall autofocusing of the A7 IV is still going to be better than the S5 Mark II, even though the S5 Mark II is completely usable. And the S5 Mark II is $2,000, and the A7 IV is $2,500. So it's like a $500 difference between those two cameras. And Panasonic has the L-mount alliance, and they have a ton of lenses available to use, and very affordable Panasonic lenses, 18, 24, 35, 50, 85, f1.8 primes. They have all the Sigma, DGDN. DN stands for D's Nuts lens collection, the same D's Nuts lenses from Sigma that Sony E-mount has. So it's a fantastic setup. And this is where Canon loses, because Canon locked off their RF mount, so that you have to buy Canon lenses if you want to use Canon RF mount cameras. Herein lies the problem. Now you have Panasonic that has equal or better image quality than you, Canon, and now it has autofocus that is equal or better than you, Canon, and it's more video centric overall, Panasonic's whole line of cameras, and now you have a better lens selection than Canon. As a new videographer, I think your two best choices right now is Sony or Panasonic. I won't say Nikon, just because I think they only have like one really good video and photo camera, and it's kind of high up there. But in terms of if you're looking to spend under $3,000 for a new camera and some new lenses, Sony and Panasonic is the way to go. It's right now, I think they are the best two brands to invest your money in. They have all the cameras in terms of the specs are all up there, it matches every other brand out there, and they have great autofocus and a great plethora of lenses. I think Canon is making a huge mistake in terms of locking off their mount. There's two things about Canon that are largely overrated. It is one, the quality of their lenses, and two, their color science. Quality of the lenses, every brand makes quality lenses now. Canon, Sigma, Sony, Nikon, like you can't go wrong with any of these, photography glass, Tamron, third-party lenses. And so that whole thing that Canon makes the best glass or whatever, or they do make great glass, but in terms of like how amazing they are, how class leading they are, that is largely overrated. And we all know color science is bullshit. So that is that. What is going to take in a camera for me to upgrade? I don't think there's anything that could ever really make me switch away from Sony at this point. And again, we all know I'm a Sony D-bag fanboy, but the reality is I'll be very stupid to switch because I have all the lenses. I have multiple bodies. and Sony's image quality and specs and everything just can match, or at least better than other brands. So like, there's no point in me doing so. So like, what is it going to take in a camera for me to really want to like upgrade? In terms of like my wants and needs, I only came up with a few things. One of them is internal NDs without losing IBIS. And in most cases, or all cases, any camera without internal NDs doesn't have IBIS. Any cameras with IBIS doesn't have internal NDs is because it's really tough to make a internal ND system that works with IBIS at the same time. Eventually, one of these camera brands is going to figure it out. So hopefully that is this year, 2023, because I think in terms of like all these other nitty-gritty specs, there's not much else you could really do to make a huge, vast improvement. It's not like going from like 4K 60 from 1080 60. It's not like going from 10-bit to 8-bit. You know, there's not much left. Like a lot of times you can't even tell on most screens the difference between 8K and 4K. You know, we're getting to the point where resolution, bit depth, and all that stuff is becoming, you're getting diminishing returns for all of these specs. So that's one. And then speaking of IBIS, I would like camera with gimbal like IBIS. And I'm talking about gimbal like IBIS without having to like crop in to your sensor to do some electronic shit. I am talking about straight up IBIS in the camera that is very, very, very close to gimbal. Is it possible? I hope so. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. You never know. And another thing is just a really big screen. I like how Blackmagic has that really big screen, touch screen, very nice looking. It doesn't force you to have to like need a external monitor, especially for small cameras like this. I don't see why Sony couldn't, you know, somehow make the screen bigger, stretch across this whole thing, move the dials around, do something, get the screen nice and big, and so that, you know, people won't have the urge of having to like put an extra external monitor in, because you have this nice small form factor, and all of a sudden you put big monitors on it, it now looks like a freaking FX9. So that would be fantastic. Or make it modular, make some type of like separate screen, like the size of like, I don't know, like an iPhone, you know, 14 Pro Max or Google Pixel 7 Pro or one of the bigger Samsungs. Make a like a separate screen that size where you can just attach and detach to your camera when needed, or something bigger, nice resolution screen with great dynamic range, color accurate, that is actually like legitimately attached to the camera already. You know, so you don't have to like put any more add-ons on it. I mean, are you willing to spend an extra few $100s for like a better screen that is already built into your camera? I know I would. The only other thing is probably just like a built-in shotgun mic. As you can see these days, like shotgun microphones don't need to be that big. And if they could somehow squeeze in some space, like maybe at the corner here, or just like make the camera just a tiny bit taller to create enough space for the electronics needed for a high quality shotgun microphone just built into your camera. Because to be quite honest, I just don't see why they don't automatically include like a decent small shotgun mic system instead of having these omnidirectional low quality mics in there. I mean, would you be willing to spend another $100, $200 for better built-in shotgun mic system right on your camera than having to attach a big bulky shotgun on top or the side of your camera? So this is my current main shotgun mic. As you can see, I've used it quite a bit. It is quite beaten up. This is Sennheiser MKE 200, and the mic I'm using for this video is a Sennheiser MKE 400. But this thing works fantastic and is actually quite small, and it attaches obviously right on my hot shoe. But as you can see, the reason why it's really bulky is because it has like this big windscreen on it. But the overall mic, the overall parts and stuff that is required for this mic isn't that big. And I think there is a way for manufacturers to fit a decent built-in shotgun microphone, very much similar to the better mics, you know, the ZV-1 has and the ZEV-10 has. But I would say just try to make one even better that is just built right into the camera. I don't see why that is not possible. Maybe because bumps and shakes and other noises, based on using your camera gets absorbed through it. I don't know. Manufacturers find a way. So for 2023, moving forward, I want to see built-in NDs with IBIS, gimbal like IBIS performance, bigger, crispier screens on the cameras, and of course, built-in shotgun mics directly on the camera. I mean, pretty much ever since 2 years ago, 2020, when Sony A7S III was released, there's not much else, people like me, videographers who do some photography would even want in their cameras. So those are my thoughts on the new Panasonic S5 Mark II, the first camera announcement for 2023, and what my thoughts on what I'd like in future camera releases this year. That said, I hope you found this video interesting and at least entertaining. Please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And until next time, lighten up. Hey man, you see the new Panasonic S5 Mark II? Yeah, it looks good. Panasonic has face detect autofocus now. Oh my god, the Panasonic S5 Mark II, it track Canon, it the best because it have the best color shine. You need to switch. Man, I'm good with my Sony cameras, bro. If you want to be the best, if you want to be professional YouTuber, you need to switch camera every month. Bro, I'm not trying to do all that. And you need to sell LUT pack and transition master class. Oh, for real, bro? Let me show you. Tired of your film look like trash? You need to have more transition in your film. My master class will show you how to do all the transition without the hormone. Well, there goes my chances of getting sponsored by Storyblocks. Sign up today and get a free LUT pack, only $29.99.